Welcome, and thank you for your interest in the boreal toad monitoring and habitat assessment surveys. This portion of the training will be talking about the field protocol for community scientists. And if you would like to follow along with the field form in front of you as I walk through how to complete the surveys and habitat assessments, you can always find and print off the form by going to the Sage and Collaborative website, clicking on the Projects tab, and selecting the amphibian page. From the amphibian page, you can scroll down to the volunteer resources here at the bottom, and then select field form. You can go ahead and print that off, as well as supporting information like the written out protocol and cheat sheets that include images and other materials that help you define anything you might have questions about on the field form. This is what the field form looks like. The first page includes information like the date and survey time and location, weather, if you've seen amphibians, site description, and any disturbances you've observed. And then the back of the form looks like a lot of detail, but it's actually really repetitive and mostly multiple choice questions, pretty straightforward. So here you can see these sections are actually identical, and you may only need to complete one depending on how many different water bodies you have at your site. So with that, I will walk you through an example of what to do when you get to a site, whether you're joining a group or conducting a survey independently. You'll be doing essentially the same thing. So firstly, you will want to take a look at the site and decide how many different water bodies you may be assessing. The field form has the option to include 3. So if you have more than 3, you may need multiple forms, but that is not typically the case. So if you take a look here, in this example, it looks like we have a stream running through into a wet meadow. You can see the margins of that wet meadow there. And then let's imagine we also have a discrete pond here in the background. So that would be 3 different water bodies at one location. It's helpful to get an assessment of those water bodies first, and then you get a sense of how you're going to complete your field form. So just running through the different sections of the form in order, you can see this first portion includes the survey date and time. So if you can give us an estimate of the time it takes you to drive to and from the trailhead, as well as how long it's taking you to survey in the field, the time hiking to and from the site. Always include your site name, as well as the names of the people who are doing the survey with you. This information is really helpful to us for tracking the number of volunteers and volunteer hours logged each year, can make our grants much stronger and more likely to be funded. So thank you for taking the time to include that. The next portion of the form asks multiple choice questions about the weather conditions during the survey. And then importantly, this middle section of the first page asks whether or not you detected amphibians. This includes boreal toads as well as other species, so you may have seen or heard them. And we ask specifically what life stage you detected. So if you've seen eggs, tadpoles, toadlets, or adults. You'll notice an X on the chytrid fungus swab section. In years past, if we have found amphibians, we have swabbed them. So just a quick note about that. We are not taking chytrid fungus swabs this year. We just have a lot of that information already, and we don't necessarily need to collect it this year. But as a reminder, note about chytrid fungus, we wear gloves always to protect the amphibians. Boreal toads are one species that can have devastating impacts from chytrid fungus, so we want to make sure we're wearing gloves when we're handling toads, and we change them between different toads so we protect them from the spread of the fungus as well as from lotions and oils on our hands. And just a reminder, chytrid does not affect humans, so we're really just, these measures are to protect the toads and the habitat we don't have to worry about the spread to humans. Additionally, we always clean our boots between different sites to avoid spreading mud or debris from one site to the next that could potentially contain chytrid. In addition to noting the number and whether or not you've seen different species of amphibians, we also want to make sure that you include photos of any amphibians at different life stages that you've seen. We want those to be up close so we can make the identification of the species, which means it's close enough to have a positive ID like this image of toad egg strands here, as well as a photo zoomed out so we can see the surrounding vegetation or the surrounding habitat. Please do make sure to email those photos along with an image of the associated field form, whether you scan it or take a photo with your phone. Please email those in to borealtoad@sageoncollaborative.org when you get back from the field. So the second to last section of the first page, includes some multiple choice questions about the site, as well as an optional section to add a comment or written description of the site. And the final section of page 1 includes giving a numeric value for the level of disturbance for different categories using 0 to 5 scale, 0 being no disturbance present, and 5 being widespread disturbance of high intensity. Now we're on to the back page. And again, although this looks like a lot of detail, it's mostly multiple choice and is pretty straightforward. And you don't actually even need to fill out the entire section. The first and most important section on page 2, the backside here, is taking a note again of those different water bodies. So just as a reminder, we're back at our site. You want to take a look and make sure you've observed the different types. You may just have a discrete pond, or you may have all three of these: a pond, a stream, a wet meadow. There's other water bodies that you may also observe, like springheads, wet meadows, beaver ponds, active or inactive, permanent lakes, standing water in a wet meadow, a temporary pool or pond, which is important to note. If this goes dry at a certain time of year before the tadpoles can develop, we definitely want to know that. And of course, there's things like marshes and bogs. Those are all multiple choice options. So once you have circled the different types of water bodies present at your site, and it's likely to be somewhere between 1 and 3, you will next be asked how turbid or cloudy the water is. And again, multiple choice from mostly clear to mostly turbid. In that same section, you'll answer multiple choice questions for the whole site across all the water bodies that might be present. And these questions deal with the prevalence of submerged, emergent, and surface vegetation. If you need clarification on the different types of vegetation, remember there's a cheat sheet that can be printed along with the field form with images of the different types of vegetation growing submerged under the water, emerging through the water surface or at the perimeter, and also vegetation that can be floating on the surface along with algae. So there's lots of helpful images on this cheat sheet that can help you with any questions you might have. The last category under this section asks you multiple choice questions about the estimated depth of the water. And this is a percent estimate of how much shallow water is present along the perimeter of water bodies, as well as an estimate of the type of substrate under the water, like is it sand, mud, gravel, or cobbly rocks. So this next section on the field form is after you have completed this first section for the whole entire site. For one specific water body, you're asked pretty much the same multiple choice questions, but for the specific water body. So if you only had one discrete pond, you would just be answering this section. And these other two sections you would not need. However, if you had a site like the image I showed previously, where you have a pond, a stream, and a wet meadow, you would complete these specific questions for each of those water body types. Finally, at the bottom of the second page, you will see a water quality section. If you're just out hiking and doing an independent survey and did not check out a boreal toad backpack, you can just leave this section blank. If you did want to plan ahead and check out a backpack from the Hogle Zoo, guest services, or the Sageland office, then you can complete this additional section. These are the items you'll find in a toad backpack: a GPS unit, water quality meter, tools for taking biometrics or measuring the toads, gloves, wipes, quat sprayer, which is to clean your boots, net, data sheets, and supporting information. So if you're going out on a field trip with others, you won't need these materials. We'll be providing those. The water quality meter is really the only piece of equipment that could use some explanation. When you get to the end of the field form, there's a section about water quality, which you can leave blank if you do not have the meter with you. But if you do have one, you'll simply need to remove the cap from the bottom of the meter. It's already removed in this picture, and place this sensor below the surface of the water. And you're usually going to do that at the edge of the water body so that you're not stepping in the sediment and making the water cloudy and disrupting that measurement. So once this sensor is submerged here, you can use this mode button. It's also the on-off button to toggle between pH, temperature, and electrical conductivity. By pressing that button, then you can get a reading for each of those metrics. You may need to wait for the readings to settle for a while you're holding the sensor underwater, but it's otherwise that straightforward. So you'll press that button for pH, let those numbers settle, record it, press the button, you'll get temperature, let those numbers settle, record it, and so on for electric conductivity. So here you can see that section filled out, really straightforward. You may do a measurement for different water bodies. So you also have an option to put an estimate for the depth of the water at the point where you're taking these measurements, which can be really helpful, as well as an estimate of how turbid or cloudy the water is where you're taking those measurements. And that is it for the survey protocol portion of the training. So please remember to scan or take a photo of your completed form after returning home from the field, and include any amphibian or habitat images you took at the site, and put those in an email to borealtoad@sagelandcollaborative.org. Thank you so much for your attention and your interest in joining this Boreal Toad Community Science Project.